Willst du noch was sagen?
Is everybody properly caffeinated? Caffeinated? How do you translate it? Koffeiniert in German? Matthias is now going to, I think, give us a really good, interesting, exciting
Different.
view of the SAP Cloud Platform, which is our, at least for my team, bread and butter. But we built also the SAP Cloud Platform on top of the SAP community on top of. And yeah, I'm not going to say that Matthias was slightly involved in our.
No, the blame is all yours.
Yeah. Okay, let's get started, huh?
Cool. Well, thank you. So actually, I'm kind of the opening gig, the warm-up gig for the 2 sessions following mine. So I'm just, yeah, as I said, trying to warm you up and get you up to speed. So maybe before I start, quick show of hands, who of you would say I have a decent understanding of what SAP Cloud Platform is? Okay, a couple of hands. And how many of you want to know about what Cloud Platform is? Okay, good. That's a good start. It's a solid start. So I tried to make this a little bit different than my usual presentation. As announced, my name is Matthias Steiner. I'm part of the Cloud Platform product management team, and for the last 5 years I have been primarily doing this, evangelizing about the Cloud Platform, trying to drive the adoption within the ecosystem, but also beyond. And as you can imagine, I always have a set of standard slides that I show day in, day out. And I said, okay, for this community-driven event, I want to go a little different because, as I said, some of you may have heard about Cloud Platform. So if I would just give my regular pitch, you would all be falling asleep. And those who don't know, I think our standard pitch is quite technical. So I said, let's go for something completely else. Having said that, I want to go back a little to 2007. And may I ask, who of you have been working with SAP or with SAP software at that point in time? Okay. So anybody remembers the good old NetWeaver days, right? So, and I think that's kind of what I'm trying to depict here, right? So we had a great application server, very powerful, one of the first Java 5 servers out there that was certified, but it was quite a complex thing. What we would say maybe a monolithic application nowadays. And as you can see from this game, once you start, building something up and you get a little bit of what they say, it grow organically or it grew over time, then you end up with something like this where it's really hard to put something on top without breaking anything, and it's also quite hard to improve what you have because if you pull something out, the whole thing may collapse. And at that point in time, we also started doing more and more acquisitions of other companies, and many of them have been using Java. A good example, for example, would be business objects, right? So when we said, okay, we have another member of the family now with SAP, of course it makes sense from a platform perspective to say, let's bring into the common platform where we have everything else. But then they said, well, the startup times, the bootstrapping times, the sheer size of your application server doesn't quite fit our needs. And this is when a team at SAP started to think about, how about giving a completely different spin? How about coming up with a really, really lightweight or lean Java server? And that was a project that was kicked off in 2007. And then, as is always, it's been a really, really small team thinking about these. And they came up with a fancy project name. In this case, it was called Pegasus. And then they started to think, okay, what are our guiding ideas to make this different than what we had in the past? And then we said, well, first of all, when we see what's happening out there, Java is used everywhere in the enterprise space. Okay, within SAP, ABAP is still number one, but we also see a lot of people are using Java. We said, in order to be successful, we gotta do it as they do in Rome, as we say, right? And we said, okay, the outside world is using servlets, Tomcat, and these type of technologies. And if we want to target market segments that are outside, and now mind the language, the SAP fortress, then we will be more successful in also acquiring net new customers. And then they said, okay, in order to, get rid of the long tail, or what other people say, technical debt, we said, let's give it a fresh start. So we don't have to concern ourselves with compatibility, being compatible to older releases, but we start with completely fresh start. And what we're going to do different this time is, instead of building it all ourselves, we will be focusing on open standards and open source as much as we can. And that has been one of the underlying principles of the cloud platform from day one, as you can see, because we feel that if we allow people to use stuff that they're already familiar with, because they have been using the same technologies in college or in their current workspace, where they can find a lot of help already available in the internet. Google's your best friend. Stack Overflow these days. I mean, right? The people speak about full stack developers all the time. Sometimes we make fun of the full stack developer, because they all go to those all those websites to look up some questions and answers typically. So it's so that's that. And then we said, instead of working on commodities, if there's something that has been done already, like a server, application server, where we don't want to differentiate from the competition, then let's just use what's there and let's just use it as is, without even modifying it, and focus on implementing differentiating capabilities. And prime example that came into life a couple of years later would be HANA, right? We said, so we believe that we can make a difference with this in-memory database platform. Let's go for it. And another thing, and I think that's also something that is really, really good mindset if you start with cloud in general, is that we really said, let's scale this up slowly. Instead of saying, okay, let's get 100,000 developers on the thing and make it the best thing ever, we said, no, we're going to take it in small baby steps, really agile manner, and make sure it works for us. And I think that's one of the reasons why we were able to get a product out on time that was not just a 1.0 release, but mature enough to then handle what followed after. And then last but not least, and I think this has been a trending theme today, is we said, okay, in order to be successful with this, we gotta embed the idea of continuous integration and automated testing from day one. Because in cloud, and just to give you a glimpse, with the cloud platform, we're updating the production landscape every 2 weeks. And as Oliver said, without downtimes to the applications, right? And if you're coming from an on-premise legacy where you're shipping on quarterly release cycles with the good old waterfall methodology and QA gates and all of this, you realize to go from there to weekly updates to the production landscape without downtime, you gotta nail this, because otherwise you're toast. So that's kind of the thinking that went into this Project Pegasus. And then in 2010, we said, let's make this real. And instead of just offering Pegasus on-premise, as we used to do in the past with NetWeaver, we said, no, why not offer it as a service? Because we don't want our customers to have to worry to operate the platform. We want them to focus on business logic. And if we're quite sincere with ourselves and honest, we realized this is what made ABAP so successful, right? That it was so easy to use. And all the heavy lifting was taken care of by the underlying frameworks, right? Open SQL kind of shielded you from knowing how to write proper SQL statements, at least until recently when we introduced HANA, and everything else. So it was really, really easy to focus on business logic, and this is what public cloud platforms actually try to achieve. So if we go further, and the reason why I have depicted Star Trek Enterprise here is because we called it the next generation Java platform, right? And we had the slogan to boldly go where no one has gone before, because we felt that at the time, and I'm talking 2010, nobody within it would have associated cloud with SAP back in the day. So we were really like a small team of rebels, if you will, right? With a crazy idea, and the rest of the company had completely different thing in mind. Like I said, this is when the HANA train started, so everybody was talking HANA, and just a couple of colleagues and myself, we have been thinking about, hey, let's do Java cloud, and then we're like, yeah, whatever. So, and then we thought, okay, so what is this? So if you take a look at the main stakeholders in software, right? We have users on the left, we have the business and the financial interests of the business on the right-hand side, and then we have the developers in the middle who are supposed to be the ones that make it all real. And on the user side, we say we want apps that are easy to use, right? I think a good example is Google Mail or whatever mail client you use. So you just log on and you have it all out there. You have nothing to worry about. A bad example that I always bring up in the past is Adobe Reader. So I stopped using Adobe Reader for one reason, because every time I opened it, it started, you have to update. And I don't want to, start I want to use it, not update it. So that's what they did wrong. They didn't have, overnight updates, and this is why I think they lost me, at least as a user. So we want applications that are carefree. They got to be there. They got to be working. I don't want to, worry about them. And the same thing with the gamers, right? You remember the times you bought a game in the store, you brought it home, and the first thing you have to do is install patches, find drivers for your graphic cards because it wasn't supported. So nobody wants that. So we just want to have applications. We want to use them on the fly, on demand, on our mobile. You know that much. So ultimately, what we want is we want a desirable solution. And I think software as a service, like I said, it's provided for you in the cloud. You just log on, is kind of the standard here. From the commercial perspective, and you have been hearing this before, digital transformation, disruptions, the Ubers and all these storylines. So everybody needs quick results. We know that change is accelerating, technology is accelerating. So if you're not quick to market, somebody else will beat you. So it's all about being able to provide your software in a minimum amount of time. And also, of course, everybody wants to lower capital expenses and say, no, if I want to grow with the adoption that I see, and I want to pay with the adoption that I see. So this whole idea of scaling up to the demand and making sure that I can operate all this complexity with a lower total cost of ownership is really, really important. So from the business perspective, a solution got to be viable. And the solution is to say, okay, I got infrastructure for all the scaling, for all the global scale, also for the reaching out to my users, plus SaaS as being the one vehicle to get the application to the users quickly is kind of where it all comes together. So the question now is, how do I develop SaaS applications? Yes, I could do so directly on infrastructure. I could become an Amazon shop, and I have a huge Chinese menu with everything I could possibly want, but I have it all combined together, and I have to operate it together. And I think that's not most people's primary business, right? Most businesses are not about reinventing the wheel when it comes to running large loads on the internet in a secure manner. So the developers, what they want is to say, I want tools that are easy to learn and to master. And I think here, this whole idea of saying I want to keep using the skills that I have acquired over time is also fundamental. And nobody wants to, having to have special trainings to teach somebody how to use tools if they're not, nobody even reads the manual these days. So if you don't have really easy ways to teach your people and for free, we had the open SAP courses as well, then you will not find adoption. Second thing is lower operational overhead. As I said, is nobody wants to operate a cloud. Trust me, you don't want to operate a cloud. It's a nightmare. It's a lot of things that you want to that you have to look into. You just want to use it and build on top, as I said. And then everybody wants first-class tooling, and what that is depends also on the user, right? So I'm a gray-haired developer. I love my Eclipse Workbench, and I will, because I have 1,000 plugins installed. I know all the keystrokes. Don't take it away from me. The next generation, they love their web-based tools. They said, I want to code wherever I don't want to mess around with on-premise tooling. So give me a great web-based tooling, and I'm fine. So it's all about choice as well, right? So what is first-class tooling depends. But good documentation is one aspect of it. So in order to make this whole thing feasible to develop SaaS applications, I think it makes sense to come up with a platform as a service offering. And if you just go a little further, what do you need within this platform as a service offering? In order to interact with your users, you need a great user experience, right? You need great mobile capabilities. You need collaboration capabilities. On this end side, if you want to stay up to date, where you need IoT capabilities in order to handle big data, you want to make sense of all this big data, so you need to go from big data to smart data so that you can actually leverage all this knowledge that you potentially have. You want to integrate with your legacy applications, of course, and everything needs to be secure. That's the first thing that comes up with cloud. And from the developer perspective, and we heard this quite often, so you need good tooling that caters to both development and operations. You need data and storage capabilities, runtimes and containers, and in the future you may also want to benefit from machine learning to build smart applications. So all of these capabilities you can either arrange by yourself and tie together by yourself by using infrastructure, or you say, I'm going with a platform as a service offering that offers me all those and more capabilities as a Kickstarter. So this is actually the idea of platform as a service and the cloud platform in the middle, to say, we give you a standardized design and runtime environment. So it's pretty easy to use. And then we make sure that we take care of the heavy lifting when it comes to complexity of cloud applications, like enterprise readiness and this whole idea of, what does it need to operate a cloud? And what it provides you for the end users is to say, yes, we have best practices. So we have samples, blueprints, we have the open SAP courses to train you how to properly use this platform. We have this whole set of capabilities that I just outlined. As I said, it's all based on open standards and open source, so you can really also use the knowledge of Stack Overflow and similar, or SAP answers.sap.com to get help from the outside and benefit. Plus, it's the same standards that everyone else is using. And everything else, the really, really complex stuff like high availability, disaster recovery, security, and all these type of things. This is what the cloud provider, in this case SAP, is taking care of. So focus on business logic and not on the heavy lifting. So as we said, we want to offer this cloud platform, and we want to build this on open standards and open source. We said, okay, what is out there? I mean, we're probably not the only ones realizing that the days of on-premise application servers is gone, is beyond. And so we identified that there is a very similar project on the way. It's called Cloud Foundry. And we started talking to them until we had to realize that technically it was pretty much what we wanted, but from an open source contribution model, we didn't have the impact that we thought we would need in order to make this the foundation of our next big thing. So it was really the collaboration model where we said, we had a couple of pull requests that didn't make it, and we had different priorities, so we said, no, let's stop there. And instead what we did is we teamed up with SpringSource, which are part of VMware, and are basically the same group that is creating Cloud Foundry, and said, let's build a common foundation, and that was the Eclipse Virgo project. So it's getting a little technical, but just for completeness, it's a Tomcat servlet, Java server, that's using OSGI to have a better granularity when it comes to componentization. So it was able, with an OSGI-based server, to update the whole thing by removing modules on the fly without having to shut down the application server, basically. And that was the technical core of this first cloud platform that we provided. And then we went to market. And the first name that we used was called Project River. So for a brief moment in time, we called the thing Project River. And we announced it at Sapphire that time, and this was the only time we had Sapphire and TechEd together in Madrid, I believe. And like I said, it was half a minute in the keynote, and the whole team was, yeah, they announced us, and nobody else paid attention pretty much. But that's when it all started. And then sooner we started, okay, what is the real name? And then, of course, it was the NetWeaver day, so we started rolling it out as NetWeaver On Demand. Shortly, we said, no, that's not a good name, and then we started calling it SAP NetWeaver Neo. That was also a name that was really, really ring a bell with a lot of the development teams, and Vishal, he was still the CTO back in the days, he also called it Neo in every internal meeting that we had. He even used it externally, even though nobody knew what he was talking about. And so we went to market. And that was when it really became interesting, because for me, I can say it was a really interesting experience to take a product basically from nowhere to where it is now. And for those who don't know, at the moment, the cloud platform has become the strategic center of SAP's cloud platform and overall strategy. So it's really in the middle. And as I said, these days there is no keynote where they don't spend a lot of time talking about it. And then we took it to market, and then we had the new official name. And this is also the reason why I kept changing the name of my presentation today, because this is a thing at SAP. You have to change the names. So we went to market with this as a global availability version with NetWeaver Cloud. And we actually managed to present this in the same keynote. Vishal called it the SAP HANA Cloud Platform, and Björn Görke, at the time, who's the owner of this thing, he called it NetWeaver Cloud. Eventually, and this is a mem in this presentation, we changed the name to SAP HANA Cloud Platform. Anyway, so the interesting thing is, and some of this already came up, so we said, okay, now we're there. How do we drive adoption? And we said we need a developer edition, and we can't charge people for it, because if we say we want money for you to test drive our platform, we will never get the momentum that we need. So we said, okay, somebody needs to sponsor a landscape where developers can test this for free. And as I said, so this was a new group, and we challenged the status quo. We said, yes, we will provide something on a perpetual, unlimited in time version for free. Everybody can use it. And it took a lot of convincing and sweet talking to get the executive management to do so. But till today, the cloud platform is still offering a perpetual free developer license. And if you take one thing away, give it a try, test it out. That would be really helpful. Another thing that I would briefly want to mention, 2012 was also the year where we had, at our technical conference, we have always this thing is called Demo Jam, where a group of engineers showed a fancy demo, and very entertaining usually for the crowd, and they had 6 minutes to demo their applications. And that year we had guys from middle school, so they were 12, 13 years old, like 2 boys, and they went on stage and they showed a mobile app connected to the cloud platform, which allowed you to check the origin of fruits and where they came from, and if they came from, I don't know, the region. And their example was to say, well, nobody wants to eat an apple that is, grew next to a nuclear power plant, right? And I would second that. And that was their example. And they made a really good show. And at the end of the day, they were second place. They got second place. So people asked, so how did you learn how to do all this? And then they said, well, we learned it all from the online documentation. And you can imagine that for me, as somebody driving the adoption of this, I love this. This was my favorite quote for the entire year. And I said, basically, well, if 2 middle school kids can build such an app based on the online documentation, what's your excuse, right? I said, seriously, we offer this for free. We give you the education for free. There are no excuses, right, not to test it. And then this thing really took off. We also said we boldly went where nobody went before, which means we go outside of the ecosystem. So that year I had a presentation at the German JEX conference, which is the largest tech conference in the German-speaking region, in the DACH area, and I presented on cloud platform. And just to let people know, yes, SAP is also in the game, and we're actually trying to be a good open source citizen. We contribute to the projects we are using, and so forth. And then my colleague Rui started with the Open SAP courses. Vitaly showed you GitHub today. Out of the 220 repositories, over half of it is cloud platform. And I recall the early days, it was around this time frame, I think in 2013, when we teamed up with Vitaly's team to say, yeah, we need a GitHub representation. We need samples out there that are easy to consume. And 2013 was also the year, as I said, where the HANA aspect of the SAP HANA Cloud Platform came into effect, so where we really offered also all the capabilities within HANA that we heard about today as well, sentiment analysis capabilities and so forth, they're all part of HANA platform, they're all available in cloud as well. And then 2014, as I said, so we're now becoming the new star. And we also said, okay, let's take it to the next level, right? And then we re-engaged with the Cloud Foundry Foundation, because in the meanwhile they have realized that in order to get the traction on their open source technology, Cloud Foundry, they need a proper open source model. And so they started talking to them again, and then we became a founding member of the Cloud Foundry Foundation. And we have, just this year in May, we have now Cloud Foundry also as part of Cloud Platform in the mix. And then in 2015, we added the IoT capabilities, and anybody knows who that guy is? The Martian? And that is, yeah. So that year, our now CTO, Björn Görke, president of Cloud Platform, went on stage, keynote, and basically what he did is he did a 1-hour demo, Cloud Platform all the way. And it was a really, really cool thing to see your own CTO on stage, you know, like really geeking out and not providing slides, but just showing it live and also showing how it all comes together. And then in 2016, he pulled off the same stunt again with a Back to the Future theme. As I said, this was also the year when we added Cloud Foundry and so forth to the mix. And just to give you an idea, as I said, so early this year, we changed the name again. So we went from Project Pegasus to Next Generation Java Platform and Java Pass to Project River, NetWeaver On Demand, SAP NetWeaver Neo. Then we called it SAP NetWeaver Cloud, SAP HANA Cloud Platform, which was then the name. We kept this name for a while, and now we have SAP Cloud Platform because we realized that a lot of people, when they hear SAP HANA Cloud Platform, they reduce it to just that, right? People just think, okay, it's just HANA in the cloud, and as I tried to make a point here, there's so much more. So which brings us to today, and I don't know if you have kids, then you probably know this movie Rio, right? With this little blue bird, Rio. And there's one thing that I always liked, and I watch a lot of movies, animated movie with my daughters. There's this guy Pedro, and he's talking to this blue bird Rio, and he said, "That ain't the level. The next level is the level." And that's exactly how we feel. So yes, great start, but now we really have to take it to the next level, if you will. So what is the next level? So this year we rolled out the multi-cloud capabilities. So we're offering SAP Cloud Platform not only on SAP Data Center, but also on AWS. And very soon, and this is some of the stuff that you may hear about going into the end of the year at the TechEd conferences with Azure and Google Cloud Platform. So we want to go with the strategy of saying many companies already have a preferred infrastructure provider where they have a contract, where they want to use, where they have, you know, clearance from global IT. That's our strategic partner. And we said we are offering Cloud Platform next to your other cloud assets that you have on that infrastructure provider. So because this co-location is really, really important for many reasons. For example, latency is the first one, right? If I have everything in the same data center, I basically have no latency, which is from a user experience very important if I do a lot of microservice architecture style cross-communication between applications. It's also important from the integration capabilities it gives me also in the area of identity management, for example, because ultimately this idea of having a single sign-on capabilities across on-premise and cloud is a really powerful one because nobody remembers passwords pretty well and so forth. And then we also want to take it into another area, but I get to this in a minute. So let's just quickly wrap up how we built this thing. And my Mac is losing power fast, so I'm going to rush through this. So we started with on-premise legacy. As you all know, we're offering the suite, BW, and then we offered by design as the first ERP suite provided in the cloud. And then we made a lot of acquisitions, SuccessFactors, Ariba, vClass, Concur, and so forth. And all of these are running on infrastructure owned by SAP in our own data centers. And then, as I said, the whole idea is to provide apps that you either build yourself, custom-built applications, or if you partner to resell them, or you buy applications in a market space and then just deploy them into your cloud account. It's kind of like what you do with the mobile apps. And in order to make this happen, instead you have platform as a service. We started with the Java runtime, as I said, and we offered HANA and SQL databases. And then we offered the server-side JavaScript engine that's part of HANA as an alternative to Java, and we added capabilities, mobile, analytics, and so forth that I mentioned earlier. But where we really want to take this is saying we have so much functionality here and in on-premise applications that are unique to SAP, and we want to offer those as business services because, quite frankly speaking, infrastructure is commodity business. We don't really want to participate here. It seems like Cloud Foundry has become the common denominator in that bucket here. Also, no differentiating capabilities. Every provider offers similar capabilities from a technology perspective. So how can we, what is our unique value proposition for customers? And we realized one of them could be if you offer these capabilities like HR-related capabilities, contingency workers, travel management, or commercial capabilities as enterprise APIs that everybody could use, right? You want to sell something, you want to build a web store, then you need shopping cart capabilities, you need billing capabilities, credit card capabilities. Why would you want to reinvent the wheel here if you can get this out of the box, right, by SAP? So we said that's a winning strategy. And then we, as I said, so we came up with the multi-cloud infrastructure, so you can also run this now in non-SAP data centers. We added Cloud Foundry into the mix, and with that we got NoSQL database support, Mongo, and Redis and others. And we also got support for containers, so Docker support is part of Cloud Foundry. And we also added something that we call virtual machines, which gives you a little bit the flexibility of infrastructure, at the same time gives you the standardization of paths so that you can really also add arbitrary components that we don't offer as part of the platform itself. Big data capabilities are coming soon. And as you probably heard, this whole idea, machine learning, blockchain, IoT, analytics, all of this, which is now part of our Leonardo branding, it's all driven and powered by the platform itself. So this is really the thing that drives most of the cool and interesting stuff at SAP, really. So the future direction is...
Sorry, on this previous slide, what about S/4HANA Cloud?
Yes, I should have probably put this more prominently over here. I give you this. I mean, we offer S/4HANA both on-premise and in the cloud. And when you want to build extensions for it, which is a big theme this year at TechEd as well, then Cloud Platform is also the preferred and designated technology for this. As I said, so the idea really is you got to be open to be successful, because with a proprietary stack, you don't win any fans these days among the developer community. But at the same time, there got to be something special that drives people to you and not to the competition. So what is this? So as I said, so we really try to be open, and this is what we have always done with OpenSAP and OpenSQL and so forth. We say it's about choices. You make your choice, right? If you trust SAP the most because we have been running your mission critical data for 45 years, then go with us. If you want to go with any of these, fair enough, we put Cloud Platform on top so you can use it everywhere. As you can see here, open standards. So when it comes to this, we use what everyone else is using out there where we see a lot of capabilities. On the platform services, OData, UI5 has been open sourced. Integration capabilities use a lot of open source capabilities and so forth. And this is where we want to differentiate. And when it comes to the market aspect, we really, really believe in open innovation, meaning, yes, we want to do exactly the same thing that the mobile space did, right? So at the moment we have Android and we have iPhone, and that's the only one left. And the way it works is the following. You have a platform and you want to attract developers to build applications for your platform. The better apps and the more apps you have, the more interesting your platform becomes for consumers, right? And the more consumers you have, the more interesting the platform becomes for developers, because this is where the money is. So this is really exactly what's happening also in the cloud space and in the SaaS space. And I think SAP has a very, very strong ecosystem already, right? And this is where we really want to leverage, and we have, I don't know, like, over 1,000 partners that are working and building apps for this as well. And like I said, we're really making a big push here to get more and more people on board. When it comes where do we want to differentiate, at the moment, SAP is really the only one that is offering this as a public cloud service, right? Yes, you can run Cloud Foundry on all of these, but you would have to do it yourself, and nobody really is offering you this choice at the moment. When it comes to this, as I said, everybody's offering the same capabilities, but of course, we have to consider how all of these fit together and work together in a more seamless way, right? I mentioned already this aspect, and as I said, this is really where we want to leverage the momentum that we have within our ecosystem. And to wrap up my presentation, I spoke a lot about the platform, and I think there's a good analogy to toys in a certain way. And there was an interview conducted a while ago with the CEO and co-founder of Playmobil, and they asked him, so your toys, they're doing extremely well. What is so interesting about them? And the guy answered with a classic response, as he said, it's not about the toys, it's what the child does with the toys. And I think that's exactly the same thing for Cloud Platform. So Cloud Platform is boring. What's really, really interesting is what customers and partners can do with the platform. And I think that's really what I want to convey. It's what can I do with this? This is what everybody should be thinking about if I was successful with what I wanted to achieve today. I don't know where we are time-wise, Oliver, so you gotta give me, do we have time for a quick Q&A?
5 minutes, 7 minutes.
7 minutes. So any questions on what I said? Yeah.
From a developer point of view, well, I'm a developer, I work in SAP for some time.
Mm-hmm.
I work in ABAP.
Mm-hmm.
I look at this and it's kind of mind-blowing. And well, I know this is the modern age. Everyone is doing this in development. All my colleagues that are not SAP are used to these stories and this. And I understand that SAP, as you told, and by your effort, is getting these things for free, but your advice, what should we do as developers? Because in my normal day, I have to continue doing my ILV reports, my interfaces, this boring stuff. If I compare to this new world, how can I go there and join? Okay, I have the open SAP courses, but what I'm trying to say is we get really a little bit confused because there's so many new things. And should I go and look for Cloud Foundry? Should I go and study Docker? Should I go? What's your advice?
It's a good question. It's a question I get quite often. Let me rephrase it into something that I think that's more important for many people that are listening. Does this make ABAP developers redundant? And my answer is always no, right? I mean, most applications that we see getting developed, they still are connected with on-premise systems on the business suite or S/4HANA. So this knowledge about function modules, how ABAP works, how it's all stored, this is extremely still relevant. What?
To create your data services?
Yes.
But if I want to go to the other world.
If you want to go, then like I said, let me finish the sentence. So for example, but what you also have to embrace, and this is what you say, is you gotta embrace continuous learning, right? So the days where I learned my craft and I can make a fortune with this skill set is gone, because there is this accelerated technology change happening. So the question is, what should I invest in, right? And I think there are numerous touch points. So for example, you could familiarize yourself with gateway and OData to understand how I can expose data within the business suite or S/4HANA to the outside world. Or if you say, well, I look into UI5, which I can use on top of an ABAP framework and as well on the Java Cloud Platform, right? Which is, it's a very good skill set. I mean, brushing up on your HTML5 and your JavaScript expertise is a very good thing. At the moment, with all the things happening with HANA, brushing up on your knowledge about SQL, and maybe looking into machine learning. So there is a lot, and you have to choose, but I think it depends also on where you want to go. And I think the most important thing is that you actually have all the resources available. So it's a problem of witches, as the Americans and the English-speaking people say it. So which one to choose from all the, so it's a first world problem, I think. At the moment, I don't know, like I said, for me, my passion was always about APIs and exposing APIs, so that's what I'm really, really interested in. So, and how to make this more resilient. So at the moment, I'm spending a lot of time looking into microservice concepts, because I have to convince Oliver to open up the API for the community network soon, but that's another storyline. Yes, Darren?
Slightly related in a way, what programming languages are currently supported or planned to be supported?
Right. Yeah. So we started with Java, as I said. We added JavaScript. With Cloud Foundry, we now have also offering enterprise support for Node. And we offer this whole concept of bring your own language, which is a built-in feature of Cloud Foundry. So pretty much you can use any community build pack. This is what it's called. So you could do Python, PHP, everything pretty much. With the exception is that SAP is not offering enterprise support for all these others yet. And we understand that this is a gap, which we believe that maybe some of the partners can fill in by saying we offer support for these things. At the moment, we understand that Java and Node and maybe Python next on the list, this is where the heavy load is, and we don't expect many people developing PHP enterprise apps anytime soon. So yeah, so these are the 3 ones we will focus on, and we offer enterprise support for Java and Node at the moment.
So I guess the key thing is that number one, you kind of Google for your language plus Foundry
Community, yeah.
and if you get hold of that build pack, you can then deploy that into
When you deploy your application, you're referencing the build pack. Yeah. Yeah. And that's part of the deployment process, that it's fetching those if it didn't already. Yeah.
In one of the slides, the on-premise world simply faded out to the left.
To make room for all those capabilities that we built into the platform, yeah.
That's probably understandable from your point of view.
Yeah.
In our industry, we have the slight problem that we just can't. So we still have to work on-premise.
It's still there. It's still here.
We are already seeing the problem that the effect rather than that. For example, the cloud platform gets updates. I think
Every 2 weeks. Every 2 weeks.
No, the S4HANA.
Okay, yeah.
Gets 4 times a year, and we get only 1 update for the on-premise solution. Do you see the on-premise solutions falling further behind in maintenance and update strategies? Because as much as some people would like to move all healthcare and patient data into the cloud, there are legal issues and other issues that are preventing us from doing that at the moment. And I'm not convinced that's a bad thing either.
No, okay. 2 things to it. A, this is, I think, important. From a technology perspective, SAP clearly has a cloud-first approach. So that's for sure. Let me take cloud integration for a moment, which is kind of the successor of PI, PO, XI, whatever we called this thing in the past. So yes, we will develop new features in the cloud first, and then eventually think about retrofitting this into PO as well. I mean, basically what you're saying is, how long do you maintain old releases? And I think we're not pushing everybody into the cloud yet, but we certainly try to make it clear to everyone that you gotta move on, that you gotta remove a little bit of the old tail that you have gathered in the last 40 years and move to S4HANA, be it on premise, and to benefit from the latest improvements. We will shift. This is already in process, that we will shift our users from the business suite ECC to S4HANA, and this will not be changed. So you better make up your mind on how far you want to fall behind before, because it's not getting easier if the longer you wait. There's so many questions now. I start here.
Okay, quick question. At the moment, we have it in the Cloud Platform Cockpit, the Neo environment, and the separate Cloud Foundry environment. Can you imagine a possible future when those 2 environments merge into one?
So first of all, I think it's important to stress that we have one cockpit which helps you to operate all of these. So we try to very, very hard, and I think the team did a great job of abstracting these differences in order to still keep the operations very similar. The question how those 2 come together, for the foreseeable future, they will live next to each other and complement each other. And we have slightly different usage scenarios for those two. So everything that's related to Leonardo, IoT, machine learning, this is all happening on Cloud Foundry at the moment. While on the existing Neo environment, we have still all this integration and extensibility capabilities and so forth. We look into making those work seamlessly together, but at the moment there's no point in time where I can say this is when they will merge or when one of them will be deprecated or whatever you want to call it. So I get a sign, time out. I will be here, so if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Thanks.
So I can start here. Hello everybody, I'm Ekaterina Gavrilova, and today I would like to talk about SAP S/4HANA Cloud SDK product, which is currently beta and will be announced on TechEd, but we can take a look at some capabilities of the tool already now. And so a couple of words about myself. First of all, started to work at SAP 10 years ago, firstly as a consultant in the area of financials for the ERP system, and later, so it was in Moscow back then. Then I moved to Germany and moved to development and product management, mainly in the cloud, so for cloud extensions for SAP S/4HANA. And the product that we are currently working on with our team in Potsdam in Innovation Center is called SAP S/4HANA Cloud SDK that I'm actually presenting now. So I do have a disclaimer here. But first, let's start with something exciting in this talk because it's important. So first of all, the question, who works with this in the day-to-day business, so to say? So who feels at home there, so to say? Yeah, okay, not that many. Actually, I'm surprised because I saw so many ABAP developers in the group here. Well, we probably all know that this is SAP GUI, which is a well-known interface for SAP ERP system, and probably we can compare our SAP ERP system with this kind of car. So why? It's very stable, it's reliable, you know that you reach your goal, so you can drive your business with the system very well. But for those who work with the system for a long time, and maybe not for that long time, you probably agree with me that you need some kind of skill to drive it. So it can be tricky, it's nice, but it can be tricky. So time goes by and SAP introduces the new version of SAP ERP system, which is also well known, and this is interface to this system, Fiori, and this is S/4HANA system, S/4HANA version of SAP ERP. What does it bring? On the one hand side, it's advanced user experience with Fiori interfaces to reporting, to Fiori interfaces to creating the data, and so on. On the other hand side, it's also more performant, as because of, for example, SAP HANA underneath. So maybe we can compare the system with this kind of car. By the way, sorry for those who prefer Audi or something like this, so it was the only free picture that I found, quite nice. Right, so this is our SAP S/4HANA. You can own nice car, but in this case, you of course need to maintain the software the hardware by yourself as well. So what else SAP introduces for business management or for traveling in this world is SAP S/4HANA Cloud. So you share the system with other travelers, you pay just for the tickets, so to say, and you travel to some destination. So you manage your business with the help of SAP S/4HANA Cloud. But of course, SAP has many, many customers who want to travel to different destinations, who need some kind of adaptations for this system. Therefore, actually, SAP and some partners build cloud extensions for SAP S/4HANA or autonomous business applications in the cloud. Then probably can be, maybe you know some of them already. This application, for example, was built at SAP in Innovation Center, financial statement inside. It's actually a cloud-native application. that consumes data from SAP S/4HANA. It also builds some additional data model and logic on top. Another example of such app that I will also demo later is SAP RealSpend, which is also cloud native, developed in Java, and SAP UI5 as a front end, which also kind of runs autonomously in the cloud and consumes the data from S/4HANA. So this kind of system can be compared with small airplanes. They're quite lightweight, run autonomously, but still has the principles of S/4HANA. So what do we want to achieve next? So we cannot build that many applications if we don't have a standard process, if we don't have a standard tooling. And this is, so we want to actually build many of these planes, so to say. And to achieve this, we have built this kind of framework or this kind of factory that we want to provide for internal SAP development and for external development, so that everybody can come by, take the tools that he or she needs to build the application, and go ahead with building their planes. So this kind of tool set, we call it SAP S/4HANA Cloud SDK. And this is what I would like to talk about now. Right, but before I move forward to what actually SAP S/4HANA Cloud SDK is, let us think a little bit about how we can extend SAP S/4HANA in general, what methodologies and what concepts can we have here. So this is the first point. Let me start with the following thing. In general, we have a SAP application, and there are two different methods that we can use for the extension of SAP S/4HANA. One would be in-app extensions, where you modify the ABAP system itself and you add fields directly in the CDS view, for example. Or you can also have side-by-side extension where you build some logic in the platform independently on the service that is directly in the backend system, that is located in the backend system. So let's take step-by-step guide here. So what possible options are there? So the first one would be simple side-by-side extensibility with custom UI. What does it mean? You have the standard OData service, or CDS view exposed as a standard OData service, whitelisted OData service in the backend S/4HANA on-premise or S/4HANA Cloud. And you can build UI application in the cloud that consumes the existing OData service. That would be a simple side-by-side extensibility with custom UI. So the only thing that you build here is the Fiori application, Fiori UI5 application that consumes OData service. What could be an example here? So for example, we have some standard Fiori application that displays line items of the FI documents. So if you want to somehow introduce it in a graphical way to build some charts, you will probably need some additional Fiori application on top of this data. This is something that you can build using this approach. There is an additional need sometimes to expose some more data from the S/4HANA system. For example, you don't see some OData services available here. You build some kind of customer extension with additional data, maybe some kind of Z-based CDS view, and you want to consume this data in the cloud. In this case, you will introduce an additional OData service in the S/4HANA system. This will be side-by-side part of the extension. But on top of this, you build also Fiori application that consumes this new OData service that you introduced. And this part will be in the cloud. And this part is side-by-side extension, so to say. There is more advanced methods that you can use, more freestyle approach, so to say, when you consume existing services, but you also build some additional Java-based, for example, or JVM-based logic in the cloud with additional data model also on the data model side, so additional tables that you introduce directly in the cloud that you probably also can consume in your Java-based application and expose as OData service. So you don't have to do this data modeling directly in the S/4HANA part, but also you can do this in the cloud directly. And on top of this, there is a UI that you can also develop with UI5. And the last option that I would like to talk about, you can combine these two options. So you can do in-app extensions, so additional OData services in the S/4HANA system with additional application logic and data model in the cloud. This can be also combined. So when I talk about the SDK, or SAP S/4HANA Cloud SDK that I would like to introduce today, actually we address these two advanced methods of extensions. This is exactly where we have the main pain point. We have this flexibility, but for this, to manage this flexibility, we need some kind of guidance. How do I develop this application, for example, with the Java language in the cloud? What quality rules my application should fulfill? What patterns, what programming languages, and so on can I use? And to answer this question, we introduce the SDK, which is built on top of the cloud platform and provides some kind of abstractions for developers that can be easily used to build apps. So let's move forward and take a look at the SDK directly. So again, moving back to the first slide, why do we need the SDK? So for the guys like me who started in ABAP, who started in SAP GUI with a classical ERP system and move into Java world, I need some kind of guidance. How I learn Java, how I start with the developing application, which tools are there, what tutorials are there, and this is exactly the pain points that we want to address with the SDK. So the main 3 points that we noticed when we started to think about how we can help our community to develop cloud applications are listed here. So the first point is related to the Java development itself, or the application development itself. When we take the developers who just learn in Java, who learn the cloud development, we want to make their life easier, to provide some kind of abstractions, to make the learning of the platform simpler. And this point we address with Java libraries that we provide with the SDK. We will deep dive a little bit what exactly is there, so what kind of components are included into the SDK and how they can really help the development. Another pain point or another aspect is not really related to the development itself, but more related to the support and continuous integration. Of course, when we move into the cloud, we know that the development cycle is getting faster, and we need to deliver the software quite fast and to automatically test it and have continuous integration, continuous delivery pipeline in place in order to regularly ship the software. This is also the point that we want to address with the SDK. So we, for example, integrate pipeline as code into our project templates, and our idea is also to publish the corresponding pipelines as open source projects, so you can also take a look and learn a little bit how you can set up your Jenkins infrastructure if you want to deliver the software. Another point, also last but not least, is of course the community. So we already have a quite huge ABAP community at SAP in the partner community, but what we are aiming to is to engage the community to together develop the Java application, to learn from each other, to learn best practices. And here we're also happy customers of SAP Community, where we have serious tutorials regarding the SDK, how you can get started with the SDK, and we are happy to kind of get feedback from you there, to answer questions, to get questions. This is how we are engaged in the community. Generally speaking, if you look in a little bit, so this high-level SDK architecture or high-level diagram, what SDK is, where it sits. So of course we are sitting on top of the platform, and basically we are helping to consume the platform services easier. So when you take the different services of the platform, what you probably need there. So for example, if you build multi-tenant applications, you need access to what tenant I'm currently in, or what user is currently accessing the service. All these kind of things, you don't need to think about how I implement the access to tenant when I work with the cloud platform, because this is abstracted in the SDK. So you basically take the class, tenant accessor, and get the tenant from the corresponding method. So things like this. And of course, there are also another part of this. So you can expose the services with the help of the SDK classes also quite easily. So you can do like exposing of data or RESTful services using corresponding methods and exactly classes of the SDK. Right, so a little bit about the technical architecture. I will now just quickly give a short overview about the components that are there, and then we can also take a look at the examples in the source code where we can maybe identify some of them, so I will get back to this picture later. So there are two main parts of the SDK that I would like to highlight. From the name of these components, you can already see this is 4 extensions of the SAP S/4HANA. So this is kind of our main focus, because of course there are many services in the platform, but we are mainly focusing on this integration part. And this part of, or these blocks of the SDK are actually there to support this S/4HANA integration. So one of them is the ERP connectivity that allows to abstract the S/4HANA editions that is connect behind the scene. So you can, when you use SDK, you can identically connect SAP S/4HANA Cloud and SAP S/4HANA on-premise. You just use a corresponding object and use the method for connection. Also, we are talking to S/4HANA not directly to the tables, but using the protocols like OData for read of data and SOAP for communication with BAPI to write data back. This is also implemented using corresponding query builders for SOAP and for OData. In the application logic level, we have an additional capabilities to wrap your S/4HANA calls into Hystrix commands. By this means, you can achieve also resilience of your application. So what actually Hystrix does, it allows to provide you some fallbacks or socket breakers in case of this backend system is unavailable, for example, which is actually crucial if you are building the multi-tenant or microservices system, also that is connecting to several third-party systems. So this is also included here. And in addition to this, we also have some cross-layer components that you see on the left-hand side. So here we have platform abstractions, which are quite important, as I mentioned before. So we actually support different versions of the platform here. And for the user of the SDK, this is quite transparent with which platform you communicate. I'm actually talking about SAP Cloud Platform here in both cases. It would be Neo or Cloud Foundry. And so we abstract different services of the platform so you can easily consume it using the SDK. There are some frameworks adaptation, for example, for feature toggling or for Hystrix framework and for persistency. And as I also mentioned before, we are aiming to provide some best practices for continuous integration pipelines. So we are providing Jenkins scripts for pipeline and also some kind of testing and mocking for unit tests that you could use or you could build. So let me just quickly show you what is already available there. At the beginning, I mentioned that I'm talking now about the beta version of the product. And if you're interested, you can actually already get access to this system or to this product and download it actually now from Service Marketplace. You just need to accept corresponding test evaluation agreement and it should be available for you. In TechEd 2017, so actually in a few weeks or months, the general availability is planned to be announced. So it will be then available in public repositories like Maven and GitHub. So let me just quickly go to the S/4HANA Cloud SDK page where I can show you some materials that are available there. So this is our main page. There are some technical details regarding the feature overview where maybe you can get some more insight on the topics that I was just talking about. But maybe the most interesting part is in the community where we have a series of blogs regarding how you can basically get started with the SDK. And I would highly recommend to take a look at this overview blog, which actually references a step-by-step tutorial how you can get started with building your cloud application. So we, with intention, we built the tutorial in such a way so you can, with the basics, start with the basics, like how do you install your development infrastructure, for example, locally with IDE like Eclipse, IntelliJ with Maven, how you install the SDK currently in beta. In GA it will be slightly different. We will adapt the tutorials correspondingly. And then how you build your first Hello World application with the SDK on 2 versions of the platform. Starting from the Hello World, we are moving to communication with S4HANA, building the example of how you can call actually cost centers, so how you can retrieve, for example, cost center data from S4HANA using our data service. And then we wrap this call into the resilient command, into the Hystrix command, where you can also take a look at what is the actual motivation behind this resilience component Hystrix that we integrate into the SDK, and also our extension for this component with regard to caching. This is also here in the step 6. And later on, there are also very important topics that are asked quite often by our partners and by our internal developments, how you can actually ensure the security of your app, where we also introduce some concepts for both versions of the platform. And this tutorial will be extended especially for the GA, so we plan, as I mentioned in the tech, it will be generally available, and we plan to provide some more information here. So what else? So you've seen on the slide we have like several components, and maybe like the main value, or like the main value of the technical part of the SDK is the S4HANA integration simplicity and the platform abstractions. I just quickly jump into the Java doc, which we also recently published for the SDK, so where maybe you can also get a little bit insight, like from the technical perspective, what's there. And this is exactly what you see. So for S4HANA integration component, you see a couple of packages here available for the OData communication, for the BAPI communication from the cloud platform, also for establishing the connectivity with S4HANA Cloud or S4HANA on-premise. For the cloud platform part, as I mentioned, this is abstraction of the platform services that we provide, and the main things like tenant, user-related information, you can retrieve it a bit easier with the SDK. Also, you have abstraction for services like login, metering, and connectivity. Also, there are some adaptation for the frameworks, for example, for Hystrix framework or for Eclipse Link for persistence. So you can also get a little bit insight what is exactly done here. And also there are some additional packages, for example, with regard to quality, like testing, mocking, etc. So this is our Java doc that is also already there. Also, I encourage you, if you are interested, to take a look at the frequently asked question blog that we post here. And actually, you can also ask more or like more technical questions here. We will be happy to provide you more insight on the SDK directly in the community. Right, so let me just move forward. Now, what I would like to show now, so this was a very quick overview of the tool and what is actually currently available. And as I mentioned, for the GA, we plan to extend the documentation, we plan to extend the tooling, and stay tuned for this announcement on the TechEd. But what I would like to do now is just on a very simple example, I show how you can get started with the SDK and what kind of app can be quickly built with this. And also, as a next step, I just show the production app that we built, or like the app which is currently used already in production, which was also built on top of the SDK. So you also get a feeling a little bit what is possible. Right, so with regard to this simple app that I would like to show and explain, it's probably not of the big value, but it explains a little bit what components are there. It's the cost center controller app that allows to read the cost centers and write them back, basically. And this is very high-level architecture, how it looks like. So you have SAP Cloud Platform underneath, and you communicate with SAP S4HANA to retrieve data and write data back, and you do this via OData or BAPI or SOAP protocol for writing. It's based on the Spring framework, and it exposes data via REST services, which are on the other hand consumed by UI5 application. So this is the idea. But first, before I move forward, Let me try. Let me try to do this. Everybody hear me, yeah? Good. I do the following. So the first step that I would like to do here is just to introduce the Hello World application. So my very first step is how I actually get started. I just built my Hello World, firstly without any communication with the SAP S/4HANA system. In order to start with the SDK, as I mentioned, currently it's in beta version. And if you would like to give it a try, you would need to download. You will get it as a zip archive, basically, and which you will install locally and install it in your Maven local repository. We also introduce a special installation script that will make it easier. Later, when it is generally available, it will be published in Maven Central. And basically, all the installation will happen automatically when you introduce your dependencies in corresponding Maven configuration file. Who have ever worked with Maven? Okay, good. So yeah, this is a component or the technical tool that allows to build your Java application. So basically compile all components from different sources, external components and your internal components, and build your jar basically that can run on the platform. So in SDK, we actually use Maven as a build tool. And you can also use Maven in your application to reference the SDK in order to include the SDK as a component. So let me just quickly show how easy it is to get started. What I have here, I've already installed the SDK locally in my Maven local repository. And what I can do now, so let me say I want to create new project based on SDK. Maven has simple commands, like you can generate the project using this command. And I just know that I can generate the project from the archetype. Archetype is kind of the blueprint of the project, or like stub project. And we introduce actually several archetypes in our SDK as well. For example, we introduce archetype for the Spring Boot framework that can then later run on Cloud Foundry with Tommy, with Tomcat, and also the archetype for Neo. So I will use one of them. So mvn clean mvn archetype generate, and then I want to use my local Maven repository. So what I'm doing now, I'm telling the Maven that I would like to go to my local Maven repository without referencing external Maven Central. And in this case, it will look up all the project blueprints that are available locally in my Maven. So let's see what happens. Right, so I have a choice now. I have 4 project templates that I can choose from, as all of them are introduced in my SDK. So one of them will be the Neo-based project. So if I would like to deploy my project later on Neo platform, I would choose this one. And 3 of them are for Cloud Foundry, for different runtime environment, for Tommy, Tomcat, and Spring. So I will go with Tommy, for example. So I just choose the option 2 here with this project template. And after a few seconds, if the network is still there, because it's downloading also some dependencies for my project, the first Hello World project will be generated. And then we can take a look at this. So all the steps I actually described in the tutorials that I just referenced. So this Hello World example is actually the step 2 and step 3 of the tutorial that you can take a look. So when I generate the project from the blueprint, now I have to enter some information that is related to my project, and this is necessary for Maven. For example, group ID, that will be something that basically later used as a package name. So for example, this is com my company or com SAP or com whatever. In this case, the artifact ID will be the name of my artifact, and I will use it Cloud Foundry application, for example. I agree with the version. So this is standard Maven attributes that normally you always have to fill when you create your Maven project. So I agree with the default value here, snapshot version. Yeah. So yeah, I agree with the default version. For the Cloud Foundry, you also have to specify an additional parameter unique hostname, which is later used in the URL of your running application. And here I will use Cloud Foundry app with my I number in SAP, so that nobody else takes this hostname. That's now generated. Let me just do the following. Now, in order to deploy this application, this Hello World application in Cloud Foundry, I need to build the jar or the var file first. And to do this, I just navigate to Hello World. Navigate to my application folder, and I use the Maven clean install option to build the jar. It will probably take a couple of seconds to build the jar file that will later be deployed on Cloud Foundry. After it downloads some dependencies and builds the project, it should be quite fast, so I think we can quickly wait for this. Just to give you a little bit the reference again, that I'm not talking, so to say, out of the blue. We have exactly this description, so you can also look it up afterwards if something is not completely clear. In the step 3 of the tutorial, where we describe basically how to build your Hello World application first. So it takes some time. So what it's doing now, so the project that I'm building, it contains a couple of components that are currently not located in my local Maven repository. And it needs to look up some components in the Maven Central, so it downloads some dependencies, for example, for Cloud Platform components or for S/4HANA components, and builds the chart together. Okay, it's still building, so let me just quickly also in parallel open the just created Maven project, so we can in parallel also take a look at the structure. So as you saw, I created the application in the Hello World folder, and the POM file is actually the main Maven configuration file that is used for referencing the dependencies and stuff like this. So I'm actually surprised that it's so long. Not good. So I just upload the just generated project into my IDE. I use IntelliJ for the development, and here we can easily take a look what kind of structure the project has. Well, by the way, it's built. For now, I just quickly deploy it, and after that we take a look at the structure. So after I executed this Maven clean install, what I got here, I got this jar file created out of my source classes that were there. And exactly this jar file I would like to push to the Cloud Platform now to make it run, to make it callable. So what I do for this, I just actually say Cloud Foundry push. And if I'm still logged in, I hope so, it will push the file to the Cloud Foundry. It looks fine. While it's pushing the jar file to the Cloud Platform, we can take a look quickly at the structure. So this is the project that was generated with the command I just executed, Maven archetype generate that you saw before. It creates this project structure. And this project structure is predefined in our blueprint project in the SDK. So one of the blueprint projects that we provide. As you can see, in the structure, we actually split the application itself from integration tests and unit tests. So you have immediately the integration test folder also here as an additional component. So we do this actually in order to avoid like deploying of a big component to the cloud platform, so to separate the tests and the logic itself. So you don't need to run all the integration tests while you are building the file. Then all the components are actually referenced here in the parent POM. So this is exactly what I meant here. This is the main configuration file for Maven. So if you haven't worked with Maven, this is the first thing you probably have to look at, like how this POM structure should be organized to build your Java projects together. Each of these components, so you can see that our project that was generated consists of basically these three components. One is the application, which contains the application logic, hello world logic. Then we have unit test and integration test. In the application logic, as a separate module, you also have a separate POM file, which actually declares additional dependencies to external components. And in the context of an SDK, the following components are of the main importance. So this Cloud Foundry, SAP Cloud Foundry and SAP S/4HANA components are coming from the SDK. And when you declare the dependency to these components here, you can actually use classes of the SDK in your development. So which I can also show you later. So this is the configuration file for Maven, where you say what you would like to use. So the main logic of this Hello World app is actually quite trivial. So we have this Hello World servlet, so this simple JAX-RS application, which can respond to get method to this URL. So the URL of application /hello, and it returns after that Hello World. So this is basically a very simple Hello World Java EE application that we have in this template. So now when we have this deployed, I can show how it works. So we have this application built, and you can, after you push the app to the Cloud Foundry, you can get immediately the URL where the application is accessible. So I can go to this URL now and see what happens. Oops, this is wrong. This is the wrong one, so this one. Sorry, it was the wrong one. So I go to this one because another window was for the other application. So this is where I built the Cloud Foundry Hello World application. I take this URL and go to this URL. So now it doesn't work exactly how it was expected. So who can tell me what should I change here in order to make it work? You're right. That's right, because it's just actually mapped to exactly this URL and Hello World. So this is just the first step, how you basically introduce your very, very first Cloud Foundry application with Java. Basically, I just did 3 simple things, or 4 simple things. Let me just repeat. The first one, I installed the SDK in my Maven local repository. The step is required only for this current beta version of the SDK. With the GA, it will be automatically downloaded from Maven Central. The second step that I did was generating of my project from the archetype. This is simply done with the Maven command, Maven archetype generate. It creates the project from the template that is introduced in the SDK. And it creates exactly this project that we just saw here. So this very simple application integration test unit test structure with the stub classes like Hello World and Hello World integration test. The third step that I did was the building of jar file that will be later deployed on the Cloud Foundry. Okay, I have not that much time, not expected. But, that was built in the Cloud Foundry, exactly. So Maven clean install is another command that can be used to build a jar. And afterwards, I pushed this jar into Cloud Foundry with the help of CF push, the special command that you get when you install corresponding Cloud Foundry tools. All the steps are explained in our tutorial, so just go ahead and try it out. It should be quite simple to start with. What you can do afterwards, that's maybe more exciting. Like you can, it's this freestyle, what I was talking about before, right? So you can do many things. You can integrate your S4HANA system by for example, communicating with S4HANA with OData and exposing this result, like using this servlet approach also. You can also take another framework, another project template. For example, if you're feeling like more familiar with Spring Boot framework, with a Spring environment, you can also take another project template from SDK and use a little bit different Java technology for this. So what I can also tell here, I actually wanted to show you how you can also build more complex app, like this cost center app here. It's not very beautiful, but you still can learn many interesting additional patterns of SDK here. For example, just very quickly, there's probably the next complexity step in the SDK. In addition to the hello world logic, we introduce here 2 additional methods, basically, which can post cost center, so when you create the cost center, and read cost center. So for these 2 steps, you just basically write 3 additional lines of code that allow you to call the OData service for reading the cost center and executing this query. And like in 2 lines of code, you can basically communicate with BAPI to write cost center back. For this, of course, you need to learn a little bit how the SDK Java API work. So what particular methods you need to call, but it's quite simple when it's clear. So using this, you can kind of build this kind of example app. And by the way, this source code that I just showed here, we plan to publish it in GitHub, so this will be available for your reference. One more thing, just to finish with. Some example of the production app that is actually built on top of the SDK. This application called SAP Railspan, which is actually used by some customers already live. So this is also a very good example how you can integrate the S4HANA logic and S4HANA data model with your additional logic and additional data model in the cloud. So for example, here, this is the application for a cost center manager who wants to compare the planned data, planned costs, with the actual costs by some dimensions like account, cost center, internal order, etc. So we can see already here that some master data is coming from S4HANA directly, like account, cost center, internal order, maybe well-known terms if you work with S4HANA or ERP system for a long time. But there are some additional dimensions which are introduced on top, so to say. And this introduction was done actually in the cloud platform directly with some SDK components. For example, something like tasks or product ranges. This is the dimensions that can be created here in the app, and they will be stored in the cloud platform. Important to mention that this cloud application don't need to replicate the data from the S4HANA in the cloud. You can also potentially read this data on the fly, communicating with OData services, maybe caching for some time, as the cache mechanism is there as well. So I think I don't have time anymore, and I think for questions also, but feel free.
Because we're running a little bit late.
Right.
We can have some Q&A at the bar.
Exactly. So I'm happy to, if you have some questions, happy to answer them, and also, to exchange experience on this cloud development topic. Very happy to do this. Thank you for your attention.
Leave the microphone on the table to operate the computer. But if you can't hear me, just let me know and I'll speak up. Okay, thank you, Oliver. Just I will try to hit the 6 p.m. mark. We'll have some absolutely amazing presentations today, but it's also been a long day, so I will try to hit the 6 p.m. Okay, so I'll be a little bit briefer in some areas. Just a very short introduction of myself. My name is Morten Wittrock. The family name is German, but I am nevertheless Danish.
My background is in on-premise SAP integration, so that's PI and PO mainly. But lately my focus is on SAP Cloud Platform and the integration area of the platform. I was also in the SAP Mentor program around the same time as Oliver actually and Darren. And back in prehistoric times, I ran an open source project called Detrobulator, which was a unit testing tool for PI mapping programs, basically. Yeah, and I also organized the Danish Insight track in Copenhagen. We have an event coming up in November 25th, so you can mark your calendars already. And I do some blogging at the SAP community site as well. I want to just briefly introduce cloud integration, since that's the topic of my talk today. Some of you might not know about it. It's the SAP Cloud Platform service for integrating cloud to cloud services and cloud to on-premise. Obviously, Matthias already mentioned this, there's a lot of functional overlap with PI and PO. But the main difference between the two is that cloud integration is hosted and managed by SAP or a partner infrastructure provider in a data center somewhere on the planet. And yeah, there's a Gartner term for that, of course, integration platform as a service, with the main difference being that not only are you integrating to cloud services and you're using some tooling in the browser in the cloud, but the actual integration flows, your integration development artifacts are running in the cloud as well. And incidentally, that is an actual SAP data center. Maybe you know of it. There's a site called sapdatacenter.com. You get a lot of information about how they actually work. Okay, so the title of the talk today is Cloud Integration Under the Hood. I won't be showing a lot of slides, but I will try to show some running code instead. The code and some of the conclusions, I will post those in the blog as well, if you're interested in seeing that.
So when did you put the slides together?
Over the last couple of hours. So what do I mean by looking under the hood? It's a metaphor, of course, for diving into the inner workings of something to figure out how does it actually work. And maybe make it reveal a little bit more of how things are working behind the scenes. Yeah, it's a car metaphor, of course. Your car has a literal hood you can look under to, I don't know, fix the engine. That's a topic for a different talk. Yeah, and another speaker. That's really not my area. Briefly about the difference in between cloud software and on-premise. So I absolutely love cloud software. I think that, well, in my book, SAP Cloud Platform is probably the coolest product that SAP ever made. There's
Would you repeat?
absolutely. It is, for sure. But there is one area where on-premise does have an edge and will probably keep that edge, and that is your ability to do some tinkering and exploring with the software. Because with on-premise software, you have quite a few avenues to do that. You can dig into configuration files. If there's an underlying database, you can examine the structure of the tables and the contents of the tables. You might even listen on network traffic to figure out how it communicates. If you have access to source code, you can learn pretty much anything there is to learn about the software. But even if you don't, you might have binaries you can decompile and still learn something. But many of those options we don't have in the cloud. You interact with the software in typically a browser-based set of tools, and you have an API available to you. But that doesn't mean that we don't have options at all. We just have to look a bit tiny bit closer to find them. That's what I'll be talking about today. And why is that interesting? Well, yeah, I think it's a great way to learn more about the platform and to learn more about the internals, and that will make you a better developer. And as I'll show later, there's some potential for building tools as well. And also, I'm just naturally curious, so last but not least, it can be a lot of fun. So for an initial really simple example, I'll take a look at the XSLT processor in cloud integration. Maybe you know of it already. XSLT is a standard language for writing transformations that change an XML document into something else. And the engine that actually does that is called an XSLT processor. And cloud integration has one. So that's one of the options for doing mappings in cloud integration. That's the XSLT processor. And from a high-level architecture perspective, that's really all you need to know. That cloud integration will run your XSLT style sheets. But you do need some more detail sometimes. And for this particular example, which happened in the real world actually, it was not made up. Some XSLT engines support Java extensions, which is a way to drop out of the style sheet and execute some Java code, especially to accomplish some of the things that are hard to do in XSLT, but easy to do in Java. So that's a Java extension. But whether you can do that or not depends on the processor. And the kind of XSLT processor in cloud integration is not documented. So that's a point where, okay, we need to convince the platform to let us know a bit more about the actual implementation details. And in this case, it's quite easy because XSLT itself has a standard way of querying the processor, which is a system property function. Let me very briefly show you a style sheet. This is a tiny bit of XSLT with a few calls to the system property function that queries the vendor of the processor, the product name, and the version. So, putting that into an integration flow in cloud integration, that's what we see on the screen here. It's really simple. It's basically just the execution of this style sheet, which is the same as we just saw. Oh, and an HTTPS channel, so I'm able to call this from the outside, which I'm going to do now from the Postman REST client. This is just the endpoint of that HTTPS channel that I added, with some authorization added, and I'm getting some XML back. Okay, so what did I learn? That the product is the Saxon processor. Not really that surprising, actually, because it's quite widespread. But maybe more interesting, the version of the processor, and in particular, it's the open source version of Saxon. Which means that I'm actually not able to execute Java extensions with the XSLT processor in cloud integration. So that's what we learned here. Continuing along those lines, I started blogging again on the SAP community site about a year ago or so. I did a lot of blogging in the early days in SDN and SCN. But I returned about a year ago. Actually basically around the time of the redesign that Oliver was talking about. So it didn't scare me off. And I didn't really plan to, but quite a few of those blogs were centered around a theme like this XSLT processor version stuff, doing the same in the area of the underlying Apache Camel framework, which is the open source framework that runs the integrations. And I started thinking that these properties, like the version numbers of the Java runtime and the Apache Camel framework and so on, would be interesting to watch over time. Because some of those upgrades are actually updated quite frequently, and some of those updates bring with them new functionality. So I would like to be notified of those, but updates to these infrastructure components like Camel and XSLT and Java and so on typically don't make it into the release notes because it's too fine-grained. And the release notes about the major new functionality, major new stuff. So you won't read about an upgrade to Camel in the release notes. So I put together an integration flow running in Cloud Integration that continuously checks these values and compares them to how did they look the last time I ran this. So I run this every hour. And whenever it detects a change in one of those properties, like a new version number for Camel, it will format that into a tweet and post it to a Twitter feed. And I had also been looking for a fun use case for the Twitter adapter, and I hadn't been able to find one. So this was it. Let me just very quickly show you the Twitter feed. So that's twitter.com/HCI tracker. HCI is a forbidden abbreviation that doesn't exist any longer. It was the old product name, HANA Cloud Integration. But I haven't gone around to changing it yet. So these are the last couple of updates. The HCI build number has changed. The Camel version has changed. Going back a bit further, yeah, the Java runtime has changed as well. I track a couple of other things that are related, like the Cloud Connector version, and you see that changed as well here. There's a pinned tweet at the top here, the linking to a blog that lists all the things that are being tracked. Okay, we're doing okay for time. So, but I would like to sort of, dig deeper, a bit deeper with a tiny bit more complicated example. And actually, Matthias mentioned already the OSGI bundles. I guess that some of you know them already. In a nutshell, a bundle contains Java classes and some configuration that you can install as a unit dynamically and remove dynamically as well. And Cloud Integration uses OSGI bundles internally. So the question becomes, how can we use this knowledge as a jumping off point to learn something that's interesting? And in particular, are the iFlows that we develop deployed as a bundle? And if they are, we might be able to do some interesting things with that knowledge. So the first order of business becomes, how do I get access to the bundles that are installed in my Cloud Integration tenant? Okay, let me just skip to, this is the API documentation of the OSGI Java classes and interfaces, and this is the bundle interface. If I've got a bundle object, I can get a bundle context, which is how it interacts with the framework, basically. From that context, I can, in fact, get a list of all installed bundles. So that reduces the problem to, okay, now I need to be able to get one bundle, and from that I can get every bundle. And there's a solution for that as well. In the OSGI framework package, there's this utility class called framework util. And it has a really convenient method here that lets me get the bundle of a particular Java class. So if I can come up with a Java class that probably belongs to a bundle, I can use this method to get a reference to that bundle. So then I can reduce the problem to, okay, if I can come up with a Java class probably belonging to a bundle, I can get a list of every installed bundle. And I do have a candidate for just such a class. Because every time you do scripting in cloud integration, you interact with a class called message, which is your which provides you with access to all kinds of information about the message that you are processing at that instant. So I think it's a fair bet that that class belongs to a bundle somewhere on the cloud integration tenant. Okay, so let me show you a bit of Groovy code here. This is in a nutshell what I'm trying to do. I've got a class that I believe to be in a bundle, and I use the framework utility class to get a reference to that bundle, and from that point I can get to the bundle context, which is where I get the list of all installed bundles. And from that I will just basically generate a bunch of XML for each bundle. I will extract some information. If I go back to the documentation of the bundle interface, some of this stuff is more interesting than others. The symbolic name is interesting, and the manifest headers contain a bunch of information about the bundle that would be interesting to see. Okay, so that's what I'm extracting here, the headers and the symbolic name, and using the Groovy markup builder class to format this in XML.
So you do read documentation?
It happens. I put this in an integration flow. It's just as simple as the other one. It's basically just the code and an HTTP channel to be able to execute it from the outside world. Okay, so I'm running that now. Also, I put in up here the count of every bundle, should we be so lucky to actually get a list of them. So it might take a while to extract all this and get it back. Yeah, according to Postman, there's 2.5 megabytes of XML here. So 790